Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm joined by Dekru, Flavia, and Bob, and we're gonna be hanging out and drawing and answering questions and stuff. Um, so yeah, so uh, is the stream working? I always have to.
It's working.
That's
It's
working.
working.
You can let me know for future. Just that it's working and stuff, because otherwise I'm probably gonna ask. All right. So for the topic of today, I was thinking of starting with kind of like OCs, original characters, characters that you create, and what they mean, like on a more, I guess, psychological level, like where do they come from? What does an OC tell you about the creator of the OC? Stuff like that. So on the Sycra Discord, uh, we do challenges, and the challenge for this week was to draw an OC. So, like, these are the different OCs, people who participated, and then you end up drawing the person underneath you on the lists, OC. So, Flavia did Econix's here. This is this one. And I did Cool Nights. Punch is just posting more pictures of their OCs. Alpaki did, I think this is Addison's. And then Econix did this very cool Space Waitress K on a bike. Florentin did Alpaki's guy. And then Econix did this awesome one where he put all the OCs together. Very cool. And then Cool Night did Florentines, right? So, yeah. So, what then is an OC going to reveal about the creator of that OC? What do you think, Flavia? What does an
Oh,
OC?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have that much experience with making OCs as I see other people making OCs. So,
Okay, how do you
I,
see other people making OCs? Maybe that's a good question.
like, especially when I see you
Uh-huh.
design characters, I see you sort of craft the entire purpose. Oh, this character has this for this. And because this character is in this world, they would use this like this and things like that. Whereas for me, when I was making this character, which is probably the most defined one I've made, uh, I didn't think of him as living in his own particular world or anything, so I didn't really connect him with much. So that's probably say that's probably saying something about me.
I don't know.
Um,
I don't think OCs necessarily have to be in a different world at all. I think. Um,
yeah, I didn't think about him being realistic, which is, I suppose, also in keeping with my own uh with my own things. But other than that, I think maybe the fact that I don't know, because I've made my cauliflowers and then I use these marmots as.
you're just saying words, but people might not know what that is. So when you say these things, you have to sort of explain what that is, like a
Oh
cauliflower.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So I have these characters that I've dubbed cauliflowers because they
Do you
have
want to
like
do
a.
a quick sketch of one somewhere, and then?
Well, I think Bob is doing. I hadn't noticed the similarities. Uh, so it would be like they have this elliptical thing
Can you
for a
draw a
head.
little more this way? Like just a bit. You're on
Okay.
the edge.
Okay. Go here. So they would have a skull like this with a pretty big puffy formation that's kind of growing out of their head, and this kind of like what looks like a cauliflower to me, like this particular shape. And then they have these big teeth and no lower jaw. The body's fairly human. I mean, I'm not really doing a good job.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. But the other thing about them is that they have very spiky feet, and they kind of stab the ground when going about doing things. And what, like after I made these, we were sort of talking and analyzing what they could mean, and then the aggression from the stabbing motions of the feet and the teeth, and having like very exposed, just exposed everything very raw, was kind of very similar to how I feel in life. Like internally, I have a lot of this rage feeling, and it just came up even though I wasn't intending it to. But with most people that I see, it's like, oh, you you thought of everything. And for me, it's like, well, I don't know. I guess I thought of everything, but I wasn't conscious of it.
Yeah, I registered the cauliflowers as having like a big brain with the.
Yeah, but you could also, like, you could think of it like a big brain, because that's true. I do value intellect, but on the other hand, you could see them because it's growing out of their head, so they could be like a tumor, like overdoing the intellectual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes them walk all weird because of the center of gravity shift. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so.
aggression of how you interact with the world is like stabbing it.
Well, not literally.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not literally, but that's what we're talking about. Is the symbolic,
Yeah.
the symbolic reason for doing stuff. How about you, Bob? What do you take about your? We're talking about OCs, but I think with both you and Flavia, it's almost like it's a little bit different. It's like a theme. Not necessarily like, oh, this is one character, but like this is a recurring theme.
Yeah, I noticed with my characters that like they usually go. The themes that I usually have are like they're clowns, or they're jester-like characters. They also wear frills, and like even recently with some of the characters I've been making, like they have frills and they wear fancy clothes. They tend to have like sad expressions, so I guess that says a lot about the state of where I'm at. But yeah, I think like Flavia, I a lot of what I do is intuitive, so it's subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to create characters that represent how I feel. Um, there's no real thought process or logic behind it. Like there's no world that they really occupy logically. They're just sort of, they're more symbols than anything. Like they represent my state of being, how I feel about things, and yeah, I think I think something like that comes with comes a part of being somebody who uses a lot their subconscious a lot. Like they don't really think about things. They just they feel it, and then they draw it, and it gets translated into visuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my process basically.
And yours went through an evolution where when I first use more screaming faces.
Yeah. Yeah, they started off as screaming faces, but they weren't really human-like. I think Flavia, you said something really interesting, where you said that when you first saw my screaming faces, that you said that they looked like fetuses,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then over time they started gaining more human features. Like they started having noses, they started having ears, eyes, lips, that kind of stuff. And I suppose that coincides with my maturing as a person, and then that translated across with my drawings.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Decro, I don't know, uh, you know, you as well. So, do you have themes or OCs or anything like that?
Yeah, I think whenever I draw, it's either two things. It's either something that I find is beautiful, like, I don't know, like girls and stuff, or it's something that's almost sort of like horrifying, um, like, I don't know, Cthulhu and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it too much, why I like drawing these two things so much. Um, it's always interesting to me, though, because I feel like for me, the characters that I see in video games and books and stuff like that, they feel very, like, for some reason, they feel more real than when I create something, even though it wouldn't, like, I don't see why that would be the case. I guess usually a lot of times I just sort of take something that I saw from somewhere else and thought, wow, that really made me think, and that's how I use them. Maybe it's just a confidence thing. Like when you draw, you always see your own flaws and stuff a lot. So yeah, I think that's pretty much that.
Okay. I guess for myself, again, it goes to themes. I feel like I have a bunch of original characters, more so because I've tried to make stories, and then when you do that, you end up with like more than one character because it's like, well, it's a story, so usually there's more characters. Um, but in terms of just like one character that I draw a lot, I guess right now it would be K more than anything. And then in terms of characters I relate to, I guess my three biggest, the characters I've drawn the most are Xeon from Affinity, K, and Wraith. And for all of them, I feel like they represent aspects of my personality or my identity in a way. Like, sometimes it's wishful thinking, I feel. Like, when it comes to things like, I don't know, gender or something, like, oh, what if I was like this character? What would that be like? Or sometimes I just feel like a kid, like a boy, something like that. So I have that. Yeah. Should we? Is anyone from the chat sync any of their things? Maybe we should look at that as well.
Yeah. D Moon says, I made two crummy OCs when I was 15 purely so I could draw them fighting, but ultimately threw them away after getting older. They were very cringe. Haven't had an OC since.
Yeah, I think
Iconic.
it's. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna read
I was
another.
gonna say, I think it's very common to think your OCs are cringe, or to like not give them too much credit or something. I don't know the right term to use exactly.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we don't judge ourselves very well. Like, I think we judge ourselves too harshly. I know you do. We judge ourselves too harshly and see everyone else's efforts as a lot more kind of like the grass is greener kind of thinking.
You're gonna say about Equinix, Decru?
Yeah. Equinix says, I found my OCs usually come from a mood or an abstracted self-image.
Yeah, that makes
Mood
sense.
is this a, I don't know, it's used a bit differently now, right? It means emotion or something? A feeling? Sorry, I'm not up to what the modern day people,
Yeah, we don't know the lingo.
the lingo. Anyway.
Eric V says, I have too many OCs that I only draw once. Not that I'd ever do anything with them anyway. I just like their concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's almost like a expectation of pooping on your own OCs, in a way. That's what
Yeah,
I'm
it seems-
seeing.
D-Moon says, I don't like the thought of just having OCs that aren't mascots or have no story to them. Not big into character design.
Yeah, do you think like an OC is just basically a character design, or does it have to have a story? Like, is it just that I made this character, I designed this character, therefore it's an OC, or is it like, oh, this thing has to have more? Because I feel like a lot of characters start without a story.
Yeah, like Kay started out as a mascot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yevson says, I try to make OCs, but I never feel like the design is complete, so I avoid drawing them.
You never feel the design is complete, so you avoid drawing. How are you going to complete them if you avoid drawing them, though?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't mean it as a mean thing or anything, but just seems like in order to finish, you would have to try to. Like, I feel like the process of going to completion is what creates them. Like, the doing is what makes it happen.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, for example, that it feels like the characters I see in books, movies, video games, they feel more like they are an actual character versus what I do. But then if you think about it, like just imagine like what J.R. Tolkien was thinking when he made his characters. Like he was just one person. He made all that stuff, so why can't you?
Yeah, it just takes time. Like, I feel like a lot of things in life are, you think they're really complicated when you see the final product, but if you saw the process, it was just a bunch of like, methodical steps on top of each other. Like, complexity often is born from many simple things, as opposed to just like one thing. It's not like one complicated thing, one complicated action. It's like a bunch of simple actions. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like this, it's sort of like when you play a video game, it's very easy to accomplish things because every time you do something, you have like a quest log that says do this. So doing anything in real life, it might seem very hard to be like, I don't know, create a whole world or create a character with a good backstory. But if you break it down into little steps, sort of like a video game, I think becomes easier.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like, it doesn't always happen all at once, and so to expect it all at once and like, oh, I don't have a good idea. I talk to people about this sometimes, where I talk about how I don't start with good ideas. I start with bad ideas. Like, it's fine. It's fine to start with a bad idea, understanding that good ideas take time, and some occur like instantly. It's like, oh, this is a very good idea. Usually I feel like that's when my subconscious is kicking in, that I have good ideas. But often I start with bad ideas, or ideas that I might think are bad or other people might think are bad, but I just view it as like a starting point. It's like, yeah, the idea is not fleshed out yet, so it might seem to an outsider as this is a very bad idea, but it's really up to you. You know, where do you stop? That's what determines whether a thing is good or bad. So long as you haven't decided that it's finished, then it's not finished. And any idea you have can transform from a bad idea into a good idea. It usually just takes time. Do we have any comments?
Yeah, Gary Williams says, when I do OCs, they come from a world they already created, but when I do just automated drawing or drawing without thinking, I always gravitate to something very abstract.
What? Okay. What do you mean? Sorry, can you repeat that? So, when they do OCs, it's from a world?
It's from a world they already created, but when I do just automated drawing or drawing without thinking, I always gravitate to something very abstract.
Oh, yeah. I think that's fair. Like, it's a different type of thing you're doing, because you have to consciously it's a conscious act, I think, to make an OC, although most of the origin is subconscious of the ideas. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the same for me. It's very abstract when I just turn my brain off.
Yanni says it ain't an OC without a villain arc.
Sounds like a story, not an OC, but yeah, I think I get what you mean.
But I mean, OC could just be anything, right? Like just,
yeah, it's just an original character.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to have a story attached to it.
Khalil Saidik says, yeah, the idea of making an OC without giving them a world to live in is weird to me. I would want my babies to grow and change and thrive.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like for this person, they have a relationship with their OCs as sort of like a parent would have, because they said babies, and I kind of relate to that term. Like, that's how I think of mine. Don't think Bob or Fluffy think that way about theirs, but.
D Moon says, most artists I see seem to have a bunch of OCs sitting around with no story or anything. They just exist and they like to draw them.
Mm-hmm. Is that a bad thing? Like, do you think that's bad for an OC to just exist?
I don't think so. I think there's value in them just existing, because even if you consider it just for the act of you making it, it's still got something expressed, even if you don't follow through with it or give it a full story or anything like that.
And there was a philosopher who was talking about how they believed, at one point anyway, that all OCs actually exist in another universe, and that they kind of could all come together in this universe, like a metaverse where all the OCs are real. And yeah, it's a very interesting philosophy, you know. Anyway.
Okay. Corta Churro says, through all of my years, I have come with OCs based on songs, even to these years. But right now, I have come with some concepts based in my personalities, traits, or people that I have met.
Based on... Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. Like, I've seen people do the exercise of like making random objects into a character.
Mm-hmm.
Like could just be all like any random object. That's
yeah, like
interesting.
Here's a teapot or something. You make a character.
Yeah, I mean, not even that. It's like, it doesn't even have to be just a plain thing. It could be like, I've seen, for example, in video games, there are certain items that are, I don't know, I guess sort of famous items or something. Just, I don't know, imagine like Cloud's huge Buster sword, make that into a personified character.
Interesting.
Okay, Khalil Sadiq says again, I would say even a stick figure with nothing else could be an OC by definition. They don't have to have a story, but stories are fun. Even simple stories. OCs deserve them.
Again, it's weird because we're talking about just an invented term, this OC thing. It's not like there's really a definition for what these things are, so that's why I'm kind of curious, like, what do people personally think determines this thing, and how many people are of the idea that you need story, and how many are like, no, you just, anything you create. But then if, for instance, I'm just doing a portfolio of character designs, are those all OCs because I drew them and they're not pre-existing? Or does it require something more? Is it like, does it have to be recurrent? Maybe it does. Maybe it's the fact that you've drawn them multiple times that determine...
Yeah, I wonder about that too.
Okay, Yev-san says, well, it's more I can't decide on a final design. Keep thinking about how the design could be changed.
Okay, so you're stuck in that that idea. What about your OC sort of having different versions? So it's not always the same version of them. Like, you could make it so there's an excuse to have them slightly different. So for me, with Kay, for instance, I also have this thing where I kind of want to see her in different outfits, but it's like, well, people can change your clothes. You don't have to stick to the same thing you have before, just because you can actually have variation and stuff. So.
EC says, the term OC always felt strange to me because it feels like it implies ownership somehow. To me, characters I bring into the world exist within their own worlds. I'm just responsible for showing them.
Why do you think they exist? Okay, I would be curious to hear more about this, like elaborating on this thing. Sounds...
Yeah, he also says, I understand why attribution is important, of course, but part of me does not want to own them as much as do right by the characters I draw, whatever that might mean for them.
Okay, I get it more now. Yes, yeah, that's a thing where you start to feel like, yeah, you want to do your character justice, or they have their own intention at some points, like they become realized, which can make you sound like a crazy person. You know, oh no, I believe my character is real. Oh, I see. Well, we will have to take you away now.
But that's so true with pretty much every beginning of every movement. Someone's taking their idea seriously. I think it's just innately human to come up with ideas, come up with concepts, come up with structures to the point where they're so complex, they're so intentional that you begin to take them seriously, and the next natural step is to convey it to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, do you think then taking it seriously is part of what makes it a thing? Is that like if we were to try to find a definition, and of course it's not really important because at the end of the day it's like, who cares? It's what you want it to be. But I'm curious in terms of like, well, where does it lead for discussion? What determines this thing?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent because I think these definitions are very new and they're referring to new things. So they're probably in flux, and it really depends on what group and subgroup is using a definition like this. But I think taking it seriously is probably one of the difference between an OC and just a character design.
Okay, you mentioned this is fairly new. Can you think of anything historical that would have been like an OC that people would have had that they just don't call an OC? Or is this like construction?
If you think about depictions of angels and stuff, if you think about the artists that were illustrating the biblical ideas of angels and stuff, they were...
Isn't that more like fan art, though?
No, it's not entirely fan art because they had... Like, the text is so loose that there was so much room for their own imagination. So they weren't... There's a character that's already created. It's more like a prompt. It's more like a picture this feeling and try to embody it visually to convey it to others. That's what I'm thinking. Just off the top of my head.
Do you think if Tolkien was alive now, he would consider his characters his OCs? Or does it, like when you do a story, is it something different? It's just in its own world.
Yeah, I do wonder, because he seems to have made the entire world, and characters populate a world, so there was a need for characters to embody certain types and archetypes and roles and have Like, yeah, I don't know if an OC is more you create the world that the character needs, or you create a character that the world needs, and then it's a character design.
Do we have anything that the chat's saying?
Let me see. Econix says, I'd probably call them comfort OCs. An OC you're used to drawing and can draw easily when nothing else is working for you.
So it's sort of like a default, the thing you fall back on.
Let's see.
I wonder if
Khalil
is there
Sadiq?
some kind of term for that, like the thing you fall back on, as opposed, because it sounds like with a lot of people that's really what it is. It's just like, oh, this is the thing when I don't have ideas. This is what I fall back on. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Khalil Sadiq says, I think you need to claim an OC for it to be an OC of yours. You could draw it 100 times, but if you don't consider it your original character, I'd say it's not an OC.
Interesting. So, again, there's this idea of ownership. I guess it's kind of necessary, right, to have a sense of this is my thing, you have your thing, and this is mine, and then you exert your ownership of that thing. I think there are people who, especially in this chat, who have a hard time claiming things as theirs, especially if you don't really value it. But I would say that doesn't necessarily disqualify it, just because, I don't know. Like, does it have to be self-proclaimed? What if... Because then you can't do anything after the fact, right? So, for instance, if there's someone dead, we can't say that's their OC if they hadn't claimed it. It just becomes... that's a drawing they did.
Echo Berry says, not sure if one-off designs are OCs. I'd just call those designs, but if there's an idea within them that keeps showing up, I think that core makes the OC an OC, maybe.
Maybe it's just a term that's used for other people to differentiate whether this is something you have that's derivative or original. Like, it's simply to say, like, if someone's like, oh, what's that character? You're just saying, oh, it's not an existing character, it's just something I made. Is that potentially as far as it goes? Like, it's just to help people understand that this is not a pre-existing character and it doesn't go beyond that?
Because I suppose that would make it so that there's a distinction between just an OC of many and like an avatar or something.
It definitely seems there's two definitions. One is just, oh, okay, this is not like fan art. And the other seems like, oh, this is like a character that has a story that was made by originally, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting. Do we have other...
Yeah, Thomas Murphy says, I have OCs in my head and can visualize how I would want them to look, but sometimes I straight up lack the ability to draw them. The style I want them in is too difficult to do at the moment.
Okay, so you have the character, you're just not confident that you can pull them off. Well, that will come in time. So.
Baron von Tacocat says some OCs are derivative, like Sonichu. That makes them OCD. Also says nearly all anime is derivative, which makes OCs kind of not original at all.
Depends. Like, yeah, I do see what you mean in terms of a lot of anime being derivative. I think it's just that it wasn't always that way. Like, there was a time, and it's also a part of. It's hard to say because, you know, there's a history to these things where they came from something. It's not like anime has always existed. It's something that has changed and evolved over time, but then certain things are very successful and they get passed down to the next generation in a way. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about when it comes to anime all being derivative. It's like, well, it's more complicated than that. I feel like whenever there's an absolute term, it's usually wrong in the sense of it doesn't encompass the full picture of what's being said. And I do think generally we have a tendency as a society to oversimplify. There's this like, and we've talked about this before on this stream. I guess it's a stream, not a podcast. This stream. This idea that there is comfort in the simple, and you kind of want to crystallize your thing into a bite-sized sound bite, I guess. But it's not accurate. So as you oversimplify, you can tend to get rid of important things like nuance. So, yeah, I always caution people to be careful of, I'm saying this thing because it sounds good, as opposed to like, oh, this is a very strong statement, and it makes me feel like I've said something important, but then upon scrutiny, it doesn't hold up. I think if we could get in the habit of more nuanced discussions, it would be way better for people. Do we have more things to say?
Yeah, D-Moon says, what do you think about, quote, sonas? They're kind of like OCs. They're fictional depictions that artists make of themselves. Some people just draw caricaturized versions of themselves, non-human characters.
Okay, so this is kind of like what I was saying, where you kind of input aspects of yourself into your thing. Because with me, my characters have elements of that, but they're not. So I wouldn't say, for instance, K is a sona. Okay, so yeah, interesting. It's a different thing where you're actually relating to the character more as, what would you say? It's an idealized version of yourself. It's what you wish you were. Is that it? Or is it more like what you feel like you are?
Yeah,
so if I felt like I was a hamster, then I would draw a hamster, and that would be my sona because it feels like me, even if I didn't like hamsters necessarily or something like that.
Maybe, but I think it can be a tool that could be used for more than one purpose. So, for example, if you felt like a hamster, but you don't really like hamsters, and then you sort of embody that hamster as a consequence of you feeling like a hamster. Like, if that makes it easier for you to translate certain expressions or certain attitudes or certain, like, I think then it would be a hamster sona.
Okay. All right. What else do we have, Dekru?
Yevsan says, I think OC is mainly used by people who have mostly done fan art, and original character is a less common thing they draw, so they have a different term for it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of practical sense. Okay. Yeah, so now we've gotten a few terms. We've got sonas, we've got OCs, we've got what else do we have? Like sort of recurring themes. We got the idea of a mascot. So is a mascot? I guess a mascot would be an OC because you use it to represent your brand, so it's got to be original. Could you use someone else's character as a mascot? No, right? That doesn't work.
No, I think that's bad.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And then what? Okay, so when you have like VTubers, those are all OCs, and they're also mascots, or they're personas. I mean sonas. I guess persona
they're
implies a human or something.
Aren't they avatars, the VTuber ones?
Okay, so those are avatars. So a sona is an avatar, but also an OC. Is this even worth thinking about? Am I making something out of nothing?
Chat, you tell us.
Is this very...
I mean, it feels like there's just people use these in a lot of different ways. But I wonder what exactly would a mascot be then? Like, if you compare it to an OC, like, what's the difference?
The way I thought of it initially were mascots were things that brands or teams, organizations used to personify a group of people or to personify a multitude of concepts, or to like, Tony the Tiger is a mascot for Frosted Flakes or Frosties. I think they called it Frosties when I was in England. And it's so, well, the Frosted Flakes are not gonna move around. They're not gonna talk. They're not gonna do things. So you need something to put a human face to an otherwise non-human entity. Whereas when we use mascots, but we are humans, is it a mascot? Like a team can have a mascot because it's representing a group of players, it's representing a philosophy, a culture within that, perhaps. But do you get a mascot if you're just an individual representing yourself? I mean, I guess.
It's interesting because in Spanish, the word mascota is just a word for pet.
That's funny.
Interesting. So, do we know the etymology then? Like, how did these words get...
Well, doesn't it come from mask? I don't know.
Oh, we're going like real deep into this.
I think it's important to... I think we're not going to get this topic to be interesting if we don't go deep. Because otherwise, like, it's kind of like what I was saying. Like, if you think about things on a superficial surface level, it's very easy to just, like, say nothing about things or dismiss things. And because of that, you don't necessarily expand your thinking. But I think, like, interesting thoughts come from kind of taking ideas that you thought seem obvious and then exploring them in ways that you didn't think about, and maybe you draw new conclusions, you come with new ideas that wouldn't have otherwise been arrived at. But I don't know.
Okay, so Google says that mascot comes from French mascotte, meaning lucky charm, and it was first recorded in 1867. So it's not that old.
Lucky charm. So a team using a Wait. So the leprechaun from Lucky Charms is a lucky charm.
Yeah. That's probably, they probably used the initial.
Does he have
The
a
initial-
name? Does anyone know what the leprechaun is? Does he? He must. They must all have names. Yeah. Okay. What else are people saying? Anything?
Okay, so Khalil Sadiq says, is Ronald McDonald an OC? Is the Michelin Man a Sona?
Yeah, I don't think so because it's not representing a specific person. Oh, his name is Lucky. I see. Oh yeah, his name is Lucky. Yes, of course I should know this. Right.
How could you?
I've forgotten all my TV commercials from the 90s. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, we should go to another one. Keep it going, keep moving.
Doorframe says, I think the distinguishing element is that mascots are not the group, but a character associated with the thing. Like the clown of McDonald's is its own character, whereas an avatar is the one you control.
I do agree. An avatar is something that is a living embodiment of the like. I think avatar came from Hinduism. I think that's where it comes from, where it's the god in a human form or another form. It's like, oh, I'm going to come to Earth as a cow and talk to you, or something. It's like you're well, whatever. It could be a person, right? Like, oh, this is the avatar of Indra, or the avatar of Vishnu, or something.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, if you said this in any other context outside of religion, it would be what you did. But if you consider, like, if you put 1,000 years on top of a tale like this, it becomes yeah.
Well, a lot of things are that way. Like, people
Yeah.
take things seriously that are absurd just because after a certain amount of time, I guess it's like the things with life that's interesting are that there's physical reality, things, physics and all that, and then you say it's real because it has an impact. Like, it actually does something. Oh, the world moves based on it. Things happen because of it. But ideas can also do that. Let's say I watch something and it really moves me and it makes me think differently, or it affects me emotionally. It makes me cry. It's like, okay, so the tears are real. The emotion is the emotion is real because emotion is just the physical experience of something, right? So that is real. The initial thing, was it fake? Because it doesn't exist. Because it's not part of physics. It's just it's real when it affects you, and then because it affected you, those things are real. So for instance, for you, maybe Kujo Jotaro is real because you felt something that was real. And then it becomes real.
Well, it depends really, because psychologically speaking, a lot of things that are not happening materially are still real. And therefore they're very, very valid. Because, for example, if you have PTSD and something external but unrelated triggers you and you relive an experience, that experience for you is real. It will change your brain chemistry. It will change your reactions. It will change everything about you. It will,
which is material, because you could look into the brain and say,
exactly.
oh, okay, this has changed.
Yeah.
I find this when this idea when I'm thinking about reading, like this is ink on a page that is put into symbols, and I can look at this symbol, and not me, but most people can visualize that thing that they're looking. Oh, they see the word is red ball, and they imagine a red ball, and that means something. Like, I don't know, to me, books, just this thing is like, whoa. It's mind blowing. Like, people like to talk about things like AI as, isn't this amazing? And I think, yeah, absolutely. But also books or like writing, it's incredible. You could, like, ants do this dance to tell other ants what direction to go or whatever, right?
Yeah, and so do bees.
And we're doing such an advanced thing that through words on a page you can transmit information that can affect someone and change. That's why I feel like stories are so powerful. I'm so in awe of storytelling, because if you do a bad job, who cares? Whatever. It's not a big deal. But if you do a good job, you can change everything. Like, even if it's for the worse, like you could be like a Karl Marx and, oh, here's my ideas, and then, okay, this has changed everything. But yeah, and then what is reality? Is reality what happens,
Oh, no.
or what your experience of it is?
It's probably like that's just. I don't know if you can really answer that. I mean, the only way you can answer that is that you experience it, because you can't tell if something is actually that's the truth of that object.
Yeah.
So it just becomes like your experience. Then books would technically also be something that's real.
So yeah, because it's like, okay, so the book is real, as in the paper is real. The physical properties, the material properties of the book are real, but the ideas are also real. But if the ideas are real, are they real if someone else can interpret them completely differently? Because with paper, I could experience it differently, but there is a physical property that we could say is objective. Is there an objective reality to ideas, or is it just always open to interpretation, and does that determine whether or not it's real?
Well, I think it's always open to interpretation, because I don't know. I think that's what ideas are for. Ideas are used, like that's how you convey ideas, because you can't really convey an idea directly to someone else, and this is true. Like that's why you get culture shock, for example. You have such discrepancies in the coding and decoding mechanisms of two people from different cultures that the idea doesn't translate. The idioms don't translate, the just everything else. So an idea's a distilled set of perceptions, interpretations. So it relies on the other person interpreting.
Yes. And also, most material things have
A term and one definition for ideas, not really feasible just because of that.
I have to say, Bob, the thing is working with your, like, you're improving. It's working.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's improving on stream, alive before your very eyes.
You're all getting great philosophical talks, as well as my masterpiece of a butt chin.
Yeah, and my creation, my OC is spawning such.
See, fucker? Your creations are perfecto.
The character, for the people who don't know, the name of the character is perfect.
Yeah, with with a K.
Yeah.
That's how he.
Okay. Richard MF asks, is K not a mascot to you? No. No, not anymore. It's just a character now. I would say it stopped being a mascot. Once I started working on the story enough, it was like, no, this is a character in a story. It's not a mascot. I don't use it for those purposes. And I think other people do because I did start it that way. But I personally don't consider it that way anymore. Which is like, yeah, it changes. And I was right about something. Wiktionary does attribute the origin of the use of the word avatar as borrowed from Hindustan. Descent of a deity from a heaven. Cool.
Almost everything is borrowed from them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we did it first.
That's what I sometimes I'll talk to Chinese people who will tell me about how this people say this came from Japan, but originally it came from China, and China created this and this and this, and then I'm like, yeah, and where do you think the ideas from China came from? And they're like, no, that's different. Okay, do we have more comments, Dekru?
Well, there are like a few unrelated questions we could start from the beginning, but comments relating to OCs and what is real. I don't think there's that many right now.
Yeah, let's go from the beginning and pick up what we missed.
Okay. Piton says, I have a question. Is it worth to learn traditional medium like acrylic? Will it improve my digital painting skills? And how can I learn acrylic on my own?
Yes.
Have a nice...
So I have a snarky response to this. Anyway, so will I get better at playing basketball if I play baseball? Yeah, kind of, in some things. Like, if you get better running, it'll benefit you. But there are certain things that it's like, well, isn't it just better to play... Wait, am I trying to play basketball or baseball? Uh-oh. The one I was supposed to play? Isn't it better to... Like, I think learning acrylics will help you digitally, of course. Drawing, like anything you do will help. But usually it's better to kind of do what you want to do. Like, do digital to get better at digital. Do acrylic to get better at acrylic. Do whatever, you know? There is crossover, and sometimes it's useful to do that. Usually when you're stuck, like you're exploring a thing and you're kind of making the same kind of mistakes, it might be good to do cross-disciplinary things. But initially, I think it's good to do the thing that is the thing that you want to do. And not worry about shoulds, because often it comes from other people as well. Like, someone will tell you, oh, you should do this. And then you're thinking like, oh, okay, should I? Would you have done it had they not mentioned it? And also, again, it's best to, I think, to do the thing you want to do, to get better at the thing that is the same thing. Okay, do we have...
But I have something to add for those backwards brain like mine.
Okay.
I think for me it has been extremely helpful to think of the image that I want to make as independent of medium. So if I, like when I draw in my sketchbook with ballpoint pen, I think of the same images as I do when I'm drawing on the iPad. And I think of the same images as I do when I'm painting with oil or encaustic or any other medium. And I think learning the traditional medium, not necessarily learning the medium, but learning how to express your images with different tools will help you clarify your images more. So I think there might be that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was it.
Okay.
No,
That's the tweet.
I have something to add along with that. Is that whichever one you choose to do, it's really important to if you're gonna choose to try something to figure out if it's gonna help, do a lot of it. Because I think with me, like you both mentioned how I improved with this current thing that I'm doing, and it's like well, I improved because there was a lot of trial and error involved. I
Mm-hmm.
committed myself to a project. I forced myself to try to make things work, and then what I noticed was that just from kind of almost brute forcing it and just taking note of all these little improvements, all these little things like, oh, I noticed if I do this, this, and this works. And then I just kept doing that. And I kept picking up on all these little tricks that ended up helping me improve a ton. But that only happened through a lot of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important where whichever method you go with, try to commit to it and take a note of like what works, what doesn't. And I think that's how you sort of start developing a process.
Right. Yes. Very good. Yeah, I think so much is that trick thing where it's like, well, I just did this thing and it was sort of an accident and I found out it worked and then I just kept doing it and yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what I did.
Yeah. Those things can be invaluable, especially when you learn it because it's something that it sticks. It sticks so much more when you've invented stuff. That's why I kind of don't like when people might tell me like, oh, I thought I had this original idea and then I found out like it was already a thing and I feel stupid. It's like, why do you feel stupid for coming up with that idea? Like, you did have an original idea. It's just someone else also had the same idea, but it doesn't take away from what you got. And it's very helpful to think about that thing, to think about why it's important, because then you can use it. It's beneficial to you as an idea. So, yeah.
Oh, another thing I can add on to what you just said. I for a little while I was trying. For example, I was taking this course by Evan Emanson, and while I did pick up a few things with it, when I tried to implement his process, it actually made my stuff worse. And what I realized is basically go back to what you said about like the things that you invent stick with you a lot more. That really was the case for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the process that I basically came up with came from my own brain, so of course it's going to work better than a process that somebody else did. Even though some of the things that I learned from Evan and Munson was useful, ultimately I went back to the process that I created for myself, and it was like, oh, this was way easier to remember. It was a lot quicker, and the results were better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I think it's a very important thing for people to start to appreciate what they do come up with more, to appreciate their own ideas, their own tastes, and to be less socially influenced. I think, it's a counter to all this social media. We've got way too much social influence now in our lives. So to counter it, you kind of have to work extra hard, I feel, to come up with the other way of seeing personal expressions and stuff. Okay, Dekru, next.
Okay, Delta 41212. What would you do different as a beginner if you had to learn how to draw all over again?
It's a difficult thing to talk about. Because some of the mistakes you had to make, and if you didn't make those mistakes, you wouldn't have come to the same conclusions. I think optimizing, I do feel like I would have done things differently. So one of the things I would have done is to tell myself to focus on the real world a lot more and how it affects things. So I was very obsessed with style in the sense of I liked certain things. I liked like certain art. If you can think of like Joe Mad, Guilty Gear stuff, I like that kind of like really cool, big shapes, aggressive type art. I like Kill la Kill, things like that, like very stylish. And to me, that didn't look like reality, but it's what I preferred. And it was this, I had this feeling because I came from, I was doing a lot of realism and a lot of like fine arty stuff initially. There was this feeling of like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do these stylized things. But what happened is I went from sort of copying nature to trying to understand shapes and almost thinking of things as an abstract. So sometimes artists will talk about shape design as an abstract, and I think that's okay in a sense, but it can also be kind of counterproductive to separate things from the real world instead of understanding why this is an expression of the real world. So it's similar to caricature, where in caricature, some people might think of caricature as you are distorting reality. Like, oh, you're making this person have a funny nose. But caricature, when done well, is not that. It's just an exaggeration using contrast to emphasize differences from a standard, like a generic. So how is this different than a generic? So if you had an average tree and it was tall, but it was narrow, you will make the caricatured tree taller and narrower to emphasize those things that make it different from the average standard. This all also depends on what the average standard is, so this can get muddy, especially when it comes into terms of who determined the standard, right? Like, we tend to have very Eurocentric standards for a lot of things because that's who determined the standard. And so it's not exactly accurate. But the point is that a good caricature takes what is, what exists, and it emphasizes that. A good style does the same thing. It's just what, like, you and your taste are responsible for what you decide to emphasize, the way you want to convey things. But they should come from an understood concept. So for me, I think what I would tell myself is learn science more. Learn, not science as in like equations or theories or something like that, but more like learn how the natural world works. Learn why things are the way they want to be and how to convey what you want, and understand that contrast is created from difference or from juxtaposing one thing against another. So I like sharp things. I like sharp shapes. So one of the ways to make those sharp shapes more sharp is to surround them by soft shapes, to surround them by not sharp shapes. This is a thing that's kind of sometimes overlooked, is that in order to get the effect you want, you sometimes have to go into the opposite of what you want or what you like to get the effect that you want or that you like. So, yeah, that is the thing I would say most is the answer does not lie in copying reality, it lies in understanding reality, understanding anatomy, and then with that understanding, manipulating it to whatever you want. If you want this shape to be more simplified, do that. If you want it to be more dynamic, do that. Understand dynamics. What makes a thing look dynamic? Why is a thing interesting? You know. Why is something more this than that? That's what I would focus on. And then the other big thing is to trust myself. And that's what I'm trying to convey to all of you who are younger or starting. Maybe you're not younger, you're just early in your development. Don't be quick to dismiss the special thing you bring just because other people convince you that it's wrong in some way. Like, often the best artists are I've talked on voice chats in the Discord. We have a Discord. You can get to it from either Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. But anyway, I've talked to
Anyway, we should talk about the Discord a little bit.
We have. Alpaki and I have talked about this, how there is this... there are really good artists who often, they do what everyone says is wrong, and they just keep doing it stubbornly without really changing, without really listening, I should say, to other people. And at some point, they become super good. And it's just like, oh, it all clicks. Like, at first it doesn't. It's clumsy. It's like an ugly duckling situation. And people look at it and they misinterpret where you're going or what you're going to do. And they say, like, oh, you should stop doing that. Or you should learn fundamentals. You should do this. You should do that. But at some point, you kind of transcend and it all clicks. And then it's like, oh, you've created something new and everyone loves it. And it's really cool. But the way you did it was by not doing what people say. Like, you don't take their advice, and then it sometimes works out better, but it can also work out wrong. Like, it's tough to know, like, when do you know your stubbornness is going to pay off? But usually I feel like in the end it almost always can resolve if you stick with it long enough and stubbornly enough. So that's what I would tell myself. Like, I would say you're very insecure because of what you don't know. Don't worry about that. You will gain that over time. Like, the thing with skill, it's a thing everyone wants in the beginning because it's what they don't have. But you eventually realize skill is about it's one of the easier things to get. It's still hard because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. But it is something that is actually a bit more like, well, if I do a lot, I will figure this out over time. But one of the things that's very difficult is to maintain yourself and not lose your own ideas or your own direction. That seems to be a more tricky thing to do. So say that, a lot of what you do, you think is bad because you see the bad in what it is you do and you see the good in what other people do. This is a bias you need to not keep catering to. Like, don't just accept things because, and I was also very greedy. Like, I wanted everything. I wanted to know, like, this technique and this technique and this, and but I want to be able to do this. And I would say, like, no, you don't have to. You're not going to learn everything. At the end of the day, you have to make a choice of something over something else because you don't have you don't have enough lifetimes to learn everything. Yeah, okay. We should move on to the next.
Okay, Beast says, how much value can a beginner extract from life drawing?
I would say it depends what type of life drawing, but I would recommend you draw normal people in the world and look at normal people in the world as opposed to necessarily nude life drawing sessions. I feel like those are okay, but often you end up with like weird poses that you don't really see, and so you're not connecting a lot of the important things that you could be paying attention to, because we look at gesture, we look at sort of the body and what it does. That's a big part of life drawing, but it is useful to understand human anatomy. I just wish people would do more ordinary poses in life drawing. If it was just ordinary poses, it would be really useful. But when it's just like weird, I'm bending over and doing weird stuff, it's like, it can be much less important. Depends what you want to do though. But for me, I'm not a huge fan of that aspect of it. If I was a in charge of a life drawing thing, I would say, like, take natural poses or take action poses, but things that you would see or draw, not necessarily. And I think there's, I think Graphite Studio and certain resources do offer these kinds of like photo packs where people are doing more day-to-day activities, or more like, oh, this is an action pose you'd see in comics as opposed to just someone bending over backwards. So yeah.
Okay, Baron von Taco Cat says, "Is this OC like a werebeaver or what?"
It's not a beaver, it's a marmot.
It's a marmot. It's a marmot. I
Must
don't
be
know.
a
I
new
guess
person.
does it qualify as an OC? Because I didn't create marmots.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but people who have humans didn't create humans either.
Well, fair enough, but I mean, there's nothing really. I guess they're more buff than real marmots.
Mm-hmm.
This one has a haircut.
Yeah, I would say it would in a way, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Is it a mascot?
No, it's more like that thing that we were talking about earlier, where it's a comfort drawing, but not really. Just I like marmots, and I've been drawing quite a few marmots, and just waiting for spring to settle in so that they show up where we're at. So just summoning the marmots.
Khalil Sadiq says, "I am my parents' OC."
Indeed.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Gagi says, "Since you mentioned Hinduism, they say there's no objective external reality separate from the observer. This is actually confirmed by quantum mechanics and can also be experienced firsthand."
Okay. I don't know enough of quantum mechanics to talk about it, so I will just say, oh, okay.
I heard something from one of those Lex Friedman podcasts about some real smart scientist saying that something about if you don't observe it, then it doesn't exist. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole question, like if a tree
Yeah.
falls down in the middle of the forest, did it make a noise? So for that scientist was saying that from the newest advances of quantum mechanics, that tree did not make any noise.
Yeah. I think for myself, I just tend to stick to what I do observe. And if something is not observable, like I haven't observed that thing, or I don't know for sure, I'll just like, okay, yeah, maybe, I don't know enough to talk about it, so I'm not going to, but I'm also not dismissing it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, I don't know.
Okay. Kona says, a little off topic, but does anyone's dreams have unusually proportioned characters like what's on stream?
Mine definitely do not. I dream very normally proportioned people. What about you guys?
Mine are fairly caricatured. I suppose they would be. Like they're stretched. There's a lot of volume changes in my dreams, but I read them as normal. So.
I don't remember, so I can't.
I'd say they're normal for the most part, unless I'm punching someone, which situation where my arm becomes into like a elastic or something.
Oh, you're like Luffy.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, we have a time for a few more.
I have one more here. I don't know if there's more.
Okay.
Irrelevant name says, how do you improve with proportions? I tend to draw the head smaller than the torso, and so on every time I sketch in the canvas.
Okay, there's an easy trick to this, which is it might work for you. Draw. So you said they draw the head smaller than it should be.
Yeah.
Okay, so draw the head way bigger than you think it should be. Like, go to the opposite extreme, and what I find happens is it's like a pendulum. Like, you're going too much this way, so go too much that way, and then it'll, like, swing in between, and eventually you'll land in the middle. It tends to be, at least from my experience, it's way faster than trying to go from, like, here to, like, the middle. That's kind of hard. But if you go from here to here, and then you go swing until the middle, that tends to be easier. Yeah. Okay.
Well, there is one question. Do you guys know the artist Jodaro?
I do not. I'll look it up after. I don't know.
Jodaro, is he related to JoJo?
Safwan Hassan says, I haven't seen you in a while. Is that beard real? No. No, it's fake. It's just, like, I use... Wow, I've never actually done this. Holy cow, wait. Okay, yes.
Okay.
The way your voice sounds in your head... D Moon says, the way your voice sounds in your head isn't the way other people hear you. It's interesting because I've talked to people about this, and some people say the voice they hear in their head is like their mother's voice or their parent, like someone else's voice. It's not even necessarily their own voice, which is... What is your thought?
No, that just sounds like, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, maybe. Cool. All right. See, did we answer everything? Snowfy says, figuring... Yeah, there's questions, but there's also comments. Figuring stuff out on your own feels really cool. Or, like, realizing stuff. Exploring and figuring out vanishing points. Oh, example. Exploring and figuring out vanishing points or 2-point perspective and then looking outside and being like, whoa, yes, that happened to me too. I had so much trouble understanding perspective. And then I had a teacher who said, look in the corner of a room. And then when you look in the corner of the room, the two walls that meet in the corner, you can see where they touch at the ceiling and you can see where they touch at the ground. And you can see those lines, like the line of the ceiling and the line where the wall touches the ceiling, the line there, and the line where the wall touches the floor. You follow those two lines and they converge at a point, and that's the vanishing point. It's like, oh, I get it. And then it made a lot more sense. Okay. Steely Bob says, pretty sure the beard is glued on. This doesn't prove anything. Yeah, it does. It proves that I've got very good gluing skills and very good hair setting skills. Can you imagine, like, how good I would be as a makeup artist or whatever if I could do that? I'm in the wrong profession. Khalil Sadiq says, the voice I hear in my head is always my voice, even when I'm reading. I'm basically imagining myself telling the story and voicing the characters at a higher pitch. Something that was weird for me is when I was a kid, the voice... I had different voices in my head, but one of the ones I associated with myself was not my voice. It was much older. It was like an adult voice. And the voice I have now is closer to my adult voice that my child self had. So, you're like in the future. You know what you're gonna turn into. And your future self is talking to yourself. Your young self. All right. Thomas Murphy says, it's a bit off topic, but do you like any animation manga art from an artist who is objectively a bad person? Or in other words, can you separate art and artists? And, oh, look at the time! It is time for our stream to end. So, I want to go ahead and thank my guests, Decru, Bob Meatbag, and Flavia, and you guys for being on the chat and the stream, people who were live and asking questions, and then thanks for watching to everyone who came later and is watching this on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll join us next week where we'll do this again. I hope. Again, hope. Take care, everyone. Bye.